Following up on the exercise where we took two-dimensional multi-view drawings and created a three-dimensional multi-view drawing, I want to carry that a little further and talk about how to graphically enhance these things. So our top view, same example as we used before. We had a line cutting down the middle, representing a break in the plane. With the front view, same. We had a line cutting down the middle, representing a break in the plane. Side view, we had a diagonal line cutting across, representing a break in the plane. So we have a general sense of how this object looks from top, front, and side. We want to look at how that object looks in 3D. There's a line cutting down the middle on the top, a line cutting down the middle on the front, and there's a line cutting down the side at an angle. And so we've figured out already by analyzing it that that is basically representing a wedge that's been cut out of the block. And that's our object. Now, in 2 dimensions, it's very hard to represent depth in 3 dimensions, but we can do it by using different line weights. So an object that's closer to us, or a surface that's closer to us, we can emphasize by using heavier lines. We let these lines fall a little lighter as they are further away. This one's falling away from us. Likewise, on the front view, we can punch these lines, heavy them up. On the ground, we have 2 images that are on the ground plane, resting on the ground. So I always give those a nice dark base that represents the ground. I want you also to notice that I'm not being particularly careful about being perfect. This is a sketch. And in my process, I use sketching to think and to consider possibilities, and I want to move through it fairly quickly. So, but I still want the drawings to be very, very readable and interesting, visually interesting. And so that's why giving these drawings this sort of graphic emphasis can be very helpful to capture people's interest in what it is I'm proposing. Okay? So again, I want to think about light and how light is interacting with these objects. So if I have a light source coming from over my shoulder in that direction, this thing is going to cast a shadow where these lines, if this were a square, these lines would be parallel to each other, and the shadow would end up being something like that. But because this is cut, this shadow is actually going to cut straight up to that line there at a very steep angle. And this line is going to do something, this shadow is going to do something like that. Over here, I'm going to translate that, where I'm going to imagine the box beyond. I'm going to run the shadow from that corner beyond. It's going to do something like that. It's going to come out like so, and it's going to cut back like that at a steep angle. Likewise, this shadow, the sun or light casting down is going to come down to about so. Now that changes with the angle of the light, but I'm just approximating right now. So I'm going to have a shadow cast on this surface, something like this. And this surface would be in shade. The difference between shade and shadow is that shadow is caused by blocking the sun. Shade is caused by the absence of sun. Shadow is almost always darker than shade because shade gets reflected light bouncing off of surfaces and tends to lighten it up. But I'm still interested in providing that gradient kind of shading that we've looked at previously. This piece here is in shade. I'm also impatient in my drawing. I move fast and I don't spend a lot of time trying to be super careful. If you've looked at the Ching book, and I'm sure you have, you'll notice that he is absolutely perfect in everything that he does. It is just beautifully illustrated. Now this is shadow and it wants to be darker than the shade. So here we are. And of course, you know, there's a time for being more careful and there's a time for being quick. You notice how I can use the gradation to emphasize and build up certain areas and create that sense of depth. Likewise here, this surface wants to be in shade, but I'm going to let it lighten up as it comes down toward the angled surface that we don't see, this surface. And this essentially doing the same thing, just a little bit further out in front. So I'll go ahead and emphasize that edge. Here we have a shadow cast on the surface that we've already looked at. You can do something like that. I'm going to go ahead and throw a little bit of shade on that whole surface just to give it some texture. This surface has almost direct light on it, so I'm going to let that be very light. Here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the shadow on this edge. I don't like to have lines be the definers of my shadow edge. I like to let the pencil stroke define that without having a line around it. Again, this surface is in full sunlight, so I'm just going to put a light shade over it. And then I want to have that dark shadow back here. Again, I'm drawing very fast. There will be times when we want to be more careful. Okay. And that is how you do rough sketching with three-dimensional information to create an impression of three-dimensional object.